Have you ever wondered what it is like for a child-esque first, imaginary friend to turn out to be something far more terrifying than make-believe? Hello everyone. Today I'm taking you back to the early 1970s, deep in the quiet, misty woods of Georgia, where the innocent laughter of a little girl collided with a nightmare her family could never escape. It began in 1971 when the Wyrick family, Andy, his wife Liz, and their bright-eyed daughter Heidi, packed up their hopes for a fresh start and moved into a charming house surrounded by thick forests and a yard that seemed perfect for a child to run free. For the first few weeks, life felt peaceful. Heidi spent her days under the Georgia sun, chattering to herself as she played on the swing set and imagined whole adventures no one else could see. At first, Liz and Andy thought nothing of it, an only child in an isolated home. It was normal for Heidi to invent imaginary friends. But by midsummer, something strange crept in. One day, as Heidi played near the swing, she calmly told her mother she'd been talking with a nice old man named Mr. Gordy. The name meant nothing to Liz, but the idea of an old stranger in their secluded yard made her blood run cold. She demanded Andy check immediately. He stepped outside, pistol in hand, scanning every tree and corner, but there was no sign of any intruder. He came back inside tense and confused, ordering Heidi never to speak to strangers again and to run straight indoors if she ever saw the man. But a father's warning means little against what the Wyricks were up against. The days turned into weeks, and every so often, Liz would look out the window and see Heidi sitting on the swing, giggling, nodding, or holding out her tiny hand to the empty air. When asked, Heidi would smile and say, "I'm talking to Mr. Gordy." Each time, her parents searched the yard, the woods, the shed. Nothing. No footprints, no bent grass, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. It didn't help when Heidi's stories grew more vivid. She described Mr. Gordy's clothes in detail. A neat suit, polished shoes, a kind face with an old-fashioned tie. She said he'd push her on the swing and sometimes come into the kitchen for snacks she left for him. The family started to doubt their own sanity. A prank, a stalker, or something far stranger. Then came the night that changed fear into horror. In the fall of 1971, pounding knocks rattled the front door just after midnight. Andy grabbed his gun, Liz clutched Heidi to her chest, and together they waited while the banging continued, then stopped. The police arrived minutes later, combed the yard and surrounding trees. No footprints, no break-ins, no explanation. They wrote it off as a child's overactive imagination fueling a false alarm. But deep inside, Liz knew better. Heidi wasn't lying. She was seeing something they couldn't, and she wasn't afraid. Winter gave way to spring, but the old man didn't leave. One morning, while signing leftover paperwork with the home's previous owner, Liz casually asked about the name Mr. Gordy. The woman paused and said, "James Gordy was the kindest man in this town. He owned this property for years. He's buried at the local cemetery now." "Why do you ask?" Liz's hands went cold as ice. Everything Heidi had said was real. The kind old man in her yard was not of this world at all. He had died long before they moved in. Driven by dread and desperate to prove it wrong, Liz and Andy took Heidi to the cemetery. Without hesitation, their little girl pointed at a weathered headstone. She turned to her parents and said in a calm, certain voice, "That's Mr. Gordy." What was once child's play was now an undeniable haunting. And this was just the beginning. The Wyricks would soon learn that Mr. Gordy was only the first shadow in a much darker maze that their family could never outrun. After the chilling visit to Mr. Gordy's grave, the Wyricks could no longer cling to the hope that Heidi's stories were harmless fantasies. The truth weighed on them like a stone. Their 4-year-old daughter was seeing the dead. But Mr. Gordy wasn't alone. 4 weeks after the graveyard visit, Liz watched her daughter even more closely, hoping the sightings would fade. Instead, Heidi began mentioning a new friend. A young man she called Con. Sometimes he stood near the swings, other times by her window at night. Heidi described him with innocent precision. Tall, with dark hair, wearing work clothes stained by something she couldn't name. Liz's heart sank. She'd never heard the name Con before, but dread pushed her to investigate. Digging through county records, she found something no parent wants to believe. A young man named Con, his real name was spelled that way, had died 2 decades earlier in a horrific accident at a local cotton mill. He'd been crushed by machinery. A tragic story no child should know, yet her daughter described him as if she'd seen him with her own eyes. Every attempt to reason away the impossible collapsed. Andy, desperate to restore some sense of control, bought a dog, hoping a loyal animal might chase away whatever haunted their home. For a while, the new puppy's cheerful barking seemed to lift the family's spirits. But only days later, late at night, the dog erupted into frenzied howls in the kitchen. Andy rushed in, pistol ready, to find nothing but darkness. The dog bolted out the back door into the woods and returned hours later, trembling and sick with terror. Even an innocent animal could sense what human eyes could not. By now, Heidi's encounters were more than idle chats with invisible friends. She spoke calmly of shadows standing in corners, of faint whispers she could hear, but her parents could not. Liz often found her daughter standing at the window after dusk, staring into the yard, her small face pressed to the glass. When asked what she was looking at, Heidi would answer simply, "They're watching." Then the fear turned physical. One spring morning in 1973, Liz gasped when she found thin, angry scratches running down Heidi's back and arms. She scolded her daughter for playing too rough in the yard, but Heidi swore she hadn't fallen. The next night, Andy felt a burning pain under his shirt as he slept. In the mirror, he found deep scratches etched into his shoulder blade. No blood, no torn pajamas, just the wounds themselves. It happened again and again, for 4 nights in a row. No intruder, no logical explanation, just invisible claws raking through their skin. In desperation, Liz contacted a local psychic named Mel. He brought strange equipment, heat sensors, electromagnetic meters, motion detectors. For hours he sat silently in the living room, eyes closed, listening for whispers in the silence. That night, the temperatures plummeted room by room, the sensors ticking wildly. Mel's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Your house is crowded. Some spirits are harmless, but others are not, and I'm afraid moving will not save you." For the first time, Liz and Andy understood the depth of their nightmare. This wasn't just their house. This horror was attached to their family. As if on cue, Heidi's shadows multiplied. She described black figures lurking near the bathroom, drifting down the hallway, leaning over her bed at night. She told her mother they never spoke, but watched, always watching. And Liz, already exhausted by fear, discovered she was pregnant again. Now the Wyricks were trapped. A child seeing the dead, a baby on the way, and a house that seemed to breathe fear into its walls. Neighbors avoided them, friends stopped visiting, and Heidi, the little girl who once laughed in the yard, now whispered secrets to the darkness. Outside, the Georgia woods stood silent and endless. Inside, the family braced themselves for whatever would come next, unaware that the worst hauntings had not even begun. By the time Liz gave birth to her second daughter, Jordan, in late 1973, the Wyrick home was no longer just a house. It had become a maze of whispered threats and restless shadows. Heidi, barely 5, watched her mother rock the newborn by candlelight, both of them lit by flickering lamps, because the power would mysteriously cut out every other night. Heidi spoke less of Mr. Gordy now. Instead, she whispered about darker shapes that lingered at the foot of her bed. Shapes that seemed to grow bolder each time they were ignored. Sometimes she would wake up screaming, claiming something cold and heavy sat on her chest, pressing the air from her lungs until she nearly fainted. Jordan, innocent and barely crawling, soon joined her sister's silent terror. Liz and Andy would catch her giggling in her crib at the empty ceiling, eyes tracking movements only she could see. At first, they clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, babies laughed at shadows in air. But deep down, they knew better. They had heard the footsteps at night, felt the sudden drafts even when every window was sealed tight. Word spread quickly through the rural Georgia town. Something was wrong at the Neighbors whispered behind curtained windows, spinning stories of a cursed family. Some called them mad. Others pitied them but kept their distance, afraid the darkness might follow them home. In 1974, a local reporter, hungry for a story that would grip the public, knocked on the family's door. He wanted to live with them, to feel the haunting for himself. He slept on their couch for 3 nights. Each dawn, he looked more pale, more hollow. Dud. His published article made headlines across Georgia and drew curiosity seekers, but none stayed long enough to help. Desperate, Liz called in a renowned medium named Emile, a woman rumored to have spoken with spirits since childhood. Emile didn't flinch when she crossed the threshold. She closed her eyes and in a voice soft as a prayer described exactly what Heidi had said for years. 3 shapes: a man, a woman, and a child, drifting through the halls, always watching, never at rest. She warned Liz and Andy plainly. These shadows are old, angry. Your land remembers violence. It will not forget. Emile's words offered no comfort. She had no ritual, no spell to chase the darkness away. She only told them one cold truth. If you flee, they will follow. You can never run far enough. So they stayed. What else could they do? As Jordan grew old enough to speak, the cycle repeated. She too described people no one else could see, played peekaboo with empty doorways, laughed at corners where the family dog refused to go. Heidi, now older, began to grasp how alone she was in her visions. Her parents listened, but no priest or psychic could free her. The house that should have been her childhood sanctuary had turned into a prison of whispers. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Liz and Andy would find themselves clinging to each other in the kitchen, staring at the back door that creaked open by itself, half hoping it was only the wind, fully knowing it was not. Years crawled by. Heidi, determined to build a life beyond the haunted woods, married and moved far away. But the shadows never left her. She told her husband the same name she'd whispered as a girl. Mr. Gordy. When her own children were born, they too began to speak of shadows in the corners, of an old man who smiled kindly but shouldn't exist. The haunting did not die with the house. It fed on the family's bloodline, creeping from mother to daughter, from old timber to new brick. Some nights, the Wyricks still gather at the kitchen table, lights on, curtains drawn tight, pretending to be an ordinary family for a few stolen hours. But they know better. Somewhere just out of sight, in the deep hush before dawn, Mr. Gordy is waiting, and so are the others. They live with it now, a haunting so patient it became part of them. A ghost story that grew flesh and roots. And it whispers, generation after generation. Some doors, Once opened, never close again.